period to pay customers to respond to local dispatch needs, and then to help us kind of scale up the capabilities to enable that. So that's the funding pathway we're using here. A lot of this at this stage is around testing and learning what works and what doesn't work. We think that this is a scalable thing we can introduce to our distribution planning processes to help us manage the network on an ongoing basis. Historically, that's been tricky, A, because there just weren't enough resources in the areas that we needed them to provide turn up and turn down capabilities, or we don't internally trust the responses that we might get through having contracts or programs in place that would be as compared to putting poles, wires, and a new substation there. So what we're trying to do over this 5-year period is prove that this can work, prove we can get customers to help us manage the network, and then build a kind of data-backed catalogue of an understanding of how we can rely on it. So that's really the concept. It's a testing, learning exercise. We believe that we can scale this, but we kind of need to prove that out over this 5-year period, and this funding pathway allows us to do that. So the flow chart here kind of shows how we're considering NWAs at the moment, which will lead into the upcoming RFP that we can talk about in a little bit. So really what we're looking at the moment is how we can manage peak network needs in localized areas of our network. So we're kind of continuously identifying those locations. We then screen certain criteria for where there are areas where NWAs aren't the right approach. We might have a really short-term need that we need to go and do some work immediately on. Can't do procurement there. We'll go through this process of advertising that we're interested in certain areas, issuing an RFP. We issued an EOI a few weeks ago, or close to a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago we issued it, to try and gauge where people are more likely to participate than not. That will then go through to launching an RFP, getting contracts in place, and then there's like a technical dispatch process we need to go through. We assess any contracts on a cost-based analysis before we enter into them, and then we'll start dispatching from next summer. So that's the process we're looking to work towards. And really, as I said, the whole objective is to understand how we can deploy this. So we're really interested in industry or other stakeholders' thoughts on the right way to go about this, particularly when we detail the RFP, the stuff that's going to work, that doesn't work. Are there other local flex markets that you're already participating in? If so, what's good about them? What's bad about them? Also can answer any questions that you have, or at least attempt to. We might take some away. There's a broad group of people internally working on this, so we can always take questions about certain parts. But hopefully contextually that's clear about why we're talking about this. So that's good. All right, hand over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. So with that context in mind, we want to discuss a little bit of what to expect in the coming days and weeks around the specific RFP we're planning to go to market with. So on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of a visual on how we envision customers participating in our offerings, either front of the meter assets or behind the meter aggregations. And something I also wanted to call out, there was a question when we were tabling around, what years are we looking to contract for? We are open to contracts, from now through the end of our ESMP term. So we're open to bids in this year, 2026, but we're also open to bids in 2027 for a variety of length of contracts, so that we're keeping pretty open-ended. Once the RFP is released, it will be live on Peaklow, and we'll be offering real-time service, but also schedule service. Alongside the RFP, there will also be the T's and C's and a service agreement, and those will outline the specific expectations we have of a contract to be signed with any bidder around what we expect from a dispatch perspective. As I mentioned, we will accept front of the meter or behind the meter aggregations to provide flexibility. We did offer an additional program, and I should say will offer an additional program called Connected Solutions Plus. That is a different program design, but under the same GSCF grid flexibility model, and has, it's a different approach, but of similar objectives of testing out grid services. We'll be deploying to more locations, Connected Solutions Plus this year. We went to Nantucket and Foxborough last year. So the caveat I want to give is that, where we're deploying Connected Solutions Plus, we won't accept behind the meter aggregations, but that's only a restriction at the moment on Nantucket and Foxborough. So the other Connected Solutions Plus locations will be live following our RFP awards. In terms of, as I said, the contract structures, that can vary in terms of the specific needs of the location. And in the next slide, we'll give a highlight of the specific locations we released an EOI for. So the valuation of that location will be highly dependent on the need and the location itself, and also the payment terms in terms of availability and performance is also can vary from contract to contract.
And that can be dictated by the bidder. You can kind of submit a bid based on availability or a response basis. Availability being we'll pay you for the summer period, regardless of whether we call you or not. Obviously, the dispatch responses will pay you if you respond to a dispatch. So there's obviously different levels of kind of revenue management that resources will want plenty, but that can be dictated by the bidder.
Ahead of sharing the specific locations of the EOI, you might be wondering, okay, how do I hear about this opportunity? How do I, stay in the loop about future opportunities? We did want to share the email that we have, which is a way to sign on to our distro list. But then we also have a website where our opportunities will be posted. I'll have a QR code on the last slide, so no need to memorize this. All right, so getting into the specific locations, we went to the EOI. This visual probably won't help you understand those locations, but we just want to give a general sense of where we released the EOI, where our needs are, and also like where they are not, where there aren't, indicators. But then on this next slide, we have the specific locations we included in our expression of interest. So as Nick mentioned, the expression of interest was a mechanism to get feedback from the market and provide feedback to the market on here are our needs. What is your interest like? What is your availability like? It was non-binding, but gave our team some really valuable feedback on what the market looks like and where we want to go to market. So this represents about 95% of the actual locations we'll go to market on. We still need to codify that list, and it'll be publicly available once we release our RFP. But this is a good representation of what we are envisioning for our need locations, as well as the megawatt need we included in the EOI and the specific service we are looking for at each location. The RFP will include even more information about the locations, including the value at each location, which again will be highly dependent on the need and the location itself. Nick, anything else to add here?
I guess the only other thing to add is, so this is all looking at which locations we're interested in for an upcoming RFP in the next few, hopefully, days. Just limited by our internal procurement procedures, but anyway. But there will be subsequent ones. So this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. We might, if we don't meet the capacity needs that we have in this particular RFP, we might issue future ones for future years for the same locations. We might also add locations in the future. So just because a location isn't listed here doesn't mean it won't ever be included within our plans. We're just continually working with our distribution planners to figure out areas of highest need for ourselves. And at this point, we're focused on managing our local capacity needs. There are other potential use cases that we could investigate. So one thing we're starting to think about at the moment is how could we potentially manage connections. So along with like a ARI type agreement for a new load or DG connection, could we leverage customer owned flexibility in the same location to help get someone online faster? That's kind of other things we're working on further down the pipeline. But at the moment, all of these needs are identified by a distribution plan.
So in the next phase of this conversation, we have a few specific discussion questions outlined on the bottom. But our overall objective of this time is to, provide you with what we're offering to market and ultimately get back from you on your knowledge of our NWA offerings, how we can, how can we align our offerings to the needs of our customers or potential customers. So yeah, we can start with this first question, but if anyone in the group has questions as well, we welcome those too. So sure.
So I have two questions. They're unrelated. One is, if you signed up for a contract for some of this period and your need diminished, and that would be withdrawn, Or would it just not be available for the next round of contracting for that particular circuit?
Yeah, so if we, in a scenario where, let's just say you're a front of the meter battery asset and we contract with you for 2026 to 2029, if in 2028 we realize we actually don't have a need here at all, it will depend on the agreement that you have with us. So if you've entered into a contract that you get an availability payment, you would still get that payment, the contract would still hold, but it's likely we wouldn't end up dispatching you because the need doesn't arise to have that dispatch. So you wouldn't get a dispatch payment. So it depends on the structure of the contract we enter into with you.
For the term of that contract,
Yeah.
because they're short-term contracts, right?
They are, so they're, in this particular RFP, they're all going to be summer needs in this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody.
They're all going to be summer needs for 2026 through 2029. You do not have to bid in for the entire period. You could bid in for just 1 year. Like if, I don't know, for some reason you only had ability for 2027, you could only bid in for 2027. Equally, you could say to us, this is only worth my while if I have revenue certainty for the entire period. So you could say, I need all 4 years. So it depends on the negotiation. We aren't looking to negotiate the specific terms of the contract that will govern the relationship, but we will in terms of how long's the duration, what the actual payment structure we enter into, all that kind of stuff. So it depends.
For that period. And then
For that
after that, if that need didn't exist anymore, or I couldn't qualify for a subsequent contract, that would be the end of me, right?
If so, anything we enter into a contract with you on, we would honor that.
For that period.
What we can't remember if I said at the beginning, but the funding pathway we have at the moment by the Grid Services Fund runs to June 2030. So if we're talking about summer periods, that gives National Grid a recovery pathway for really up to summer 2029. Beyond that, we don't have a recovery pathway, which is why we aren't looking for years beyond summer 29 at the moment. Doesn't mean we won't in the future. So the second DSMP phase will hopefully include a similar funding mechanism. We would like to get this to have a funding mechanism to our base rate case, our next one. So hopefully we'll be able to do longer term ones eventually, but right now summer 29 is as far as we're going to go.
So the second question was, how does this connect with programs that already exist, like a short-term capacity market management program? Would that be on top of this, or would that be part of this?
Yeah, the intention is that this is a value stacking opportunity. So it shouldn't preclude you from participating in any other market or program.
Would they be separate? They wouldn't be together.
They wouldn't be together, no, they'd be separate. Which is, yeah, maybe there's some feedback there about us finding a way to amalgamate everything we offer as an organization at least.
If I had a contract for 1 year, then I could take this for the following years.
Yeah, or you could add it. So you could have potentially 2 contracts at the same time. Our expectation is that you respond to our dispatch need, but we're not going to say you can't participate in other programs or markets at the same time. And oftentimes, what we're asking would be, again, use the front of the meter asset as an example. If that's participating in wholesale power markets, likely given what we're asking for, that our need will overlap with the time you'd want to be discharging it anyway. And so you can get revenue streams from both wholesale and our local programs.
Jared Ingham, Massachusetts DOER. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on how it might be similar to what you did in New York, if you can comment on that, and if they're different, was it applying different learning from the experience there?
So I can tell you what I know, but to be honest with you, our role is Massachusetts specific. So we do work with our New York counterparts, so we kind of know what they're doing, but not going to be best place to answer questions on the New York efforts. But they're kind of broadly aligned. We have slightly different arrangements with our regulators. We have a funding pathway that is different to theirs. We've got through that funding pathway, we have a bit more of a testing and learning capability, I guess. So in theory, any investments we make in NWAs through this funding, they have a lower barrier to prudency review than a capital asset would have, as long as we have a clear what are the objectives from a learning perspective to do this. New York doesn't necessarily have that. On the other hand, they have an incentive framework that we don't have in Massachusetts that encourages them to do it in a different way than what we do. Primarily, it's looking at the same problem and trying to solve it in a similar way. From what they've done to date, they've been more focused on, is there one large resource or asset that can provide the need that we have, and we'll enter into a contract. The contract is the same, I think, between Massachusetts and New York, other than locational specific legal requirements. we probably look at it as ideally this will be more of a portfolio-based solution. So we want a mix of front of the meter, behind the meter assets contributing to a need, so that we're not reliant on one. Whereas historically they've looked to enter into agreements with one or two providers. But ultimately we're trying to achieve the same thing in slightly different ways.
Great, thank you.
Is anybody in the room have assets or acts as an aggregator of assets that participates in any markets like this? I guess the hypothesis on our side is that this becomes scalable and that we can rely on market procurements to do this. Eventually, I think we get to a point where it's more kind of exchange traded than doing bilateral agreements, but be interested in thoughts from people in the room on that in particular. Try and make sure we head in the right direction or shape it in a way that's going to work for people that own assets.
DLM.
Okay.
Similar in New York. I think it would be helpful for financing perspective to one thing they're notorious for is a lot of transparency and what the contract value is. You're always uncertain. If it was the person who did your bidding, if they failed to get a higher contract price, if there was something about the program that changed, because I think when the numbers initially came up for DLM, they were really concerned. So
yeah,
but the contracts did not have that.
Okay. All right, that's good feedback. So the contracts that we'll end up entering into through these market-based procurements, they will have, those rates will be guaranteed for the full period. So you'll know what your rate is. Depending on how much certainty you need, will determine whether you're happier with a likely lower availability payment or a higher dispatch payment. So that's something that you as the asset owner can think about. We're kind of open to considering both. Again, we want a mix of availability and dispatch services. But you would, if you went down the availability route, that payment will be guaranteed for the duration of the contract. So it should give you more certainty. That's it. Yeah, that's good feedback.
I think even, I don't know if you would publicly publish a range so that people, when they were deciding whether or not it would be, if they would be interested in it, they can sort of understand if it's their location is worth.
Yes. So we will within the RFP provide a ceiling price. So that will give you a view of what we're willing to spend. That ceiling price is calculated versus a counterfactual. So what would we do if we can't get flexibility here? We're obviously hoping that there's competition, and so we don't end up paying the ceiling price everywhere. That's the intent. But that will give a guide of what we think it's worth in each location. Sorry. If you're willing to do it for free, then that'd be great. There's no floor. No, you can bid what you want. You can bid above the ceiling price. It's just unlikely we'll accept it, because at that point we might as well just do whatever the counterfactual is. But you're free to bid at whatever point you want to. Free is preferable.
So I guess that brings to the question, are you doing this is like an auction, are you awarding within each of these projects lists you have there, are you awarding contracts based on submissions or based on an analysis of value?
So we'll take all of the submissions, and hopefully it's a big challenge because there's lots of submissions, but we'll see. And we'll map those technologies and what's been offered and the price that's been offered. We have a tool that will do this against the network needs, and that will kind of tell us what's the best portfolio to then go and procure. So it could be that we in one location procure with one provider. It could be in another we procure from 10. And probably from our perspective, we're interested in trying both of those approaches, because we want to know whether it's better to have one provider versus a portfolio that we can lean on more. So,
But if you had a portfolio, is there a way of choosing who is in it, moves out of it?
we'll have a selection process.
Within the criteria in the RFP.
There,
For example, if you said, I don't want anything behind the meter in this particular solution, it'd be nice to know we didn't have to waste our time.
Yes.
yeah,
We'll specify what category of like assets we'll be procuring in each location, whether front of the meter.
yes.
But I guess I didn't give you a chance to answer. Is there, if you had 8 megawatts of solutions proposed for 6 megawatt list on there, how do you pick, other than the technology and the sort of other criteria that the customer can know it's not feasible to even enter this or not? You have to.
So yes, the RFP will lay out what is feasible. So that should hopefully be clear, but you can always ask if it's not. I guess the other factor that will determine what we choose is price. So we're not going to pay more if someone offers exactly the same technology, exactly the same service for a lower price. But we might be interested in mixing the price points up to get a range of technologies, because there's an element of testing and learning about this. So it's not just going to be who's the lowest bidder necessarily. We also have within the tool that we'll use to procure the portfolio functions that are around how much do we think we can rely on certain technologies over others. So that's
it'd be useful to respond to it by saying, this is what I'm proposing, but this is how I'm proposing to manage it internally. So that would be a learning opportunity for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Be able to bid in assets that are not yet operational or presumed to be yours.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Does not need to be connected already. There are different contractual requirements if you're bidding in with a yet to be interconnected asset. So we'll have certain milestones that need to be met along the way to contracting. But yes, you can bid in. And if it helps, if you've got something you think will be connected in 2027, you could submit only a bid for 28 and 29.
So there is a bit of flexibility on the time frame in which the construction is.
Yes,
Could it be a study?
it can be. I guess the risk then is on you to be able to meet the need if we enter into a contract.
If it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perform.
Yeah. There's terms in the contract which lay out penalty structures.
Similar.
Not as harsh as the capacity market.
Okay.
I would say, but yeah, they're laid out in the terms and conditions. So the QR code that we have, this is our NW website. So this is where the RFP will be eventually launched. That's where the EOI was hosted. The terms can be accessed through there too. So everything is in there. If anything is not clear, again, you can reach out. But yeah, there's a risk component there if you want to go with an asset that's not connected yet, but you can do. But one of the things we actually want to do is through this, it incentivizes people to put new assets onto the network. Again, we'll see in practice if that works and if 2029 is long enough to allow people to make that decision. But that's one thing you want to find out for you.
Thank you.
Kind of going off of that, a lot of these RFPs have the technology readiness level attached to like the system that you want to put in there, like the specific one for the specific project, or just go side by side.
Don't know the answer to that question. You know?
That'd be an RFP.
It will be in the RFP.
Yeah, it'll be.
I was wondering,
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be there, but you can take that away as well.
So for the availability and dispatch and the pathways, do either of them get like a day ahead notice? Do they, like, is it always availability or is it have availability tomorrow? Some kind of time for that.
Yeah, so if you enter into a availability arrangement, the expectation is you're available for the entire
At
period.
any point.
Yeah. In reality, we'll tell you if we want to dispatch you potentially more than day ahead. If you enter into the kind of real time product, it might be closer to dispatch, but it's not going to be like some markets, particularly in Europe. They literally call you like a minute before and tell you to dispatch. It's not going to be that dynamic at this stage.
And it's not like a communication thing where it can just automatically dispatch you. It's more of the call operators and then dispatch.
The hope is that we can integrate in a way where it can be automated, but that might not work for everybody. So we can, in the kind of contract negotiation process, we can figure out the best dispatch signal to send. My hope is that we're not doing load of phone calls dispatch, but that's something we can consider if that's what's needed. But hoping to automate it as much as possible. We're also separate but linked to this internally working on our own kind of market orchestration capabilities. So we're in the process of looking into a DERM solution and then what kind of grid edge DERM capabilities we'll need. So long term is this is all automatically orchestrated.
I guess my concern is like if you're participating in both the transmission market and the distribution market, and they both expect you to have capacity at any point, then you need to know which one wants you at what point.
Yes.
For a battery, so.
Yeah. And so that might dictate whether you're interested in bidding into the more real-time dispatch approach or a further ahead one. But yeah, I understand that concern. That's kind of part of the risk management exercise, I think, for the owner of the asset. Now we're over. Any final thoughts, questions, ideas? Open to ideas as well.
Just curious, I know that in New York, you have that feature on your distribution maps that are available for those interconnecting. So I'm guessing you're going to be doing the same for Massachusetts when this is up and running.
At some point, yes, that's on our development pathway. So we have capacity hosting maps already in Massachusetts.
Right.
We'll look to, we want to be as transparent as possible with the needs that we have. Because I think the other thing we want to do, might take a little longer, is try and map where we think distributed resources are that can contribute. So we can really clearly show we've got a need here, here's assets that can meet it. Hopefully the two things marry up to provide the support. Yeah.
Great.
I think our view here is that more transparency is better than less. If we're not achieving that, we're always open to feedback and thoughts on that too. But that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank
Please respond to the RFP if you have assets that can.
We'll also be at the table in the main
Yeah.
area if anyone has any other questions.